Hi, Stephanie here. I am an entrepreneur, lobbyist, wife, mother, book lover, and political junkie. I think gender equality is still a work in progress in our homes, our workplaces, and our politics. And I love to learn, especially from other women. So I started Women Don't Do That, a podcast and blog to talk about issues women care about today and to inspire us to do whatever it is we think we can't do. Dr. Betsy Grunch is a neurosurgeon. She is also a wife, mom, and hilariously funny. She is also a social media favorite of many, including me, and I can't wait for you to hear Betsy's story and advice. So let's dig in. Welcome, Dr. Grunch.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here, Betsy. I like to kick things off by asking people, what does life look like for you right now?
So life is pretty crazy. It's usually like that most of the time in my world. But yeah, it's football season, which is like one of my hobbies, and I spend a lot of my weekends watching football, and of course, busy being mom and a doctor. So yeah, things at this time of year are crazy. Get ready for holidays and that kind of stuff. So.
Yes, you'll be the first doctor we've had on Women Don't Do That from a wide range of women doing interesting things. So it's great to have you here.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's fun. I'm happy to share my world with you guys.
One of the other questions we like to ask folks is, what motivates you to live your best life?
So I think being a surgeon and being particularly taking care of trauma patients and seeing like how life can be, I think I kind of understand what can happen in just the blink of an eye, and life can be just totally different than what you see it is today. So I try to do my best to, spend as much time as I possibly can, not only doing what I love at work, but trying to enjoy what I love outside of work, because you just never know what may change. So, yeah.
That makes me think about why you chose neurosurgery. And I follow you on TikTok. So I know a little bit about your story from that perspective, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah, so I actually went into medicine because of a traumatic event, which I think a lot of people kind of aim and change what they do based on their life experiences. And so for me, I was a teenager, and my mom was a police officer, and she was injured in the line of duty. And she, her patrol car was shot at, and she suffered a auto accident when she ran off the road and hit a tree, and became quadriplegic due to a spinal cord injury. So at the time I was 13 and 14, and really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. And so just that whole year experience of her surgery and her rehab and getting to go home is just, it's very obviously life changing for our family. I really became motivated to want to learn how to fix people that were in her condition and take care of people that were in her condition. So that's what really pressed me into wanting to be a spine surgeon and to be a neurosurgeon. So I began like shadowing her neurosurgeon in high school, and really learned a lot about the field and became very passionate about it. And yeah, so here I am.
It's such an amazing story.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, a lot of people, like I said, choose what they do, but and think that they want to do certain things. But I really just enjoy taking care of patients that have kind of been in similar circumstances. And I feel like it helps me not only take care of them, but also empathize with them and try to, I think, it helps being on their side if they know someone's been through it on my side and can understand. So it definitely helps me kind of empathize with patients a lot better.
Yes, I imagine it makes you better at your job in many respects. I this is not the same, but I suffer from chronic migraines, and my specialist also has migraines. And so I just feel like when she's talking to me, that she understands it in a little bit of a different way, which I can really appreciate, because it's hard to understand what it feels like to be debilitated that way, and unless you've really been through something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the same thought. Yeah.
When you've had some big obstacles to get to where you are. I know too that you were the first to graduate college. How do you become the type of surgeon that you are? Like, what's the steps to get to where you are today?
So it's a long journey. So I really don't know if I could do it again, but after high school, to become a neurosurgeon, you have to do undergraduate, which is 4 years, 4 years of medical school, and then match into a neurosurgery training program. After that, 8 years into an additional 7 to 8 years of training. So it's like 15 to 16 years after high school. And then some people even subspecialize beyond that, which is more years of training. And so, yeah, it can be up to like 18 years of education before you actually are on your own, actually, making a reasonable amount of money and paying back your loans and actually, being independent, so to speak. So it is a lot of investment of your entire 20s and sometimes even half of your 30s into that type of training. And it's really stressful and challenging, but many people do it, and it's achievable, but it was tough. And I think I was already so deep into it by the time I figured out what the hell I was doing. So it was, I just had to finish. So
Yeah, I live in Canada, and I have a cousin who did her medicine in the United States, and she kind of always laughs when people are like, oh, like, doctors just do it for the money. And she's like, it takes so long and so much money. Like, you couldn't possibly do it if your only motivation was money, because it's terrible.
no,
Like, it's hard
yeah,
to
I hate it when
describe, I
people say
think.
that. Yeah, it's so, I mean, there is no way, I don't think that anybody could persevere what we have to get through to get where we are for money. And it's not worth it, because if that's your only motivating factor, you'll burn out immediately. So I just think that's I don't think a lot of people understand it, and they only see like, oh yeah, at the end it's X, Y, and Z, but the struggle to get there, not many people would want to do unless you're very passionate about what you want to do. So
Right. Can you speak a little bit to what you do in your type of medicine, like your area of focus, what it is, what it isn't? Because I know there's sometimes confusion. I know you did a TikTok about how it's not about headaches, like that's a different kind of doctor. So what does that, your specialty, look like?
um yes, hang on one second, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay. So basically I'm a neurosurgeon, so I specialize in brain and spinal surgery. So I do brain tumors, head trauma, all the way to, scoliosis surgery or herniated disc surgery, carpal tunnel surgery. So a variety of any type of condition that really affects our brain or our spine. I subspecialize in spine. So I do probably 90 to 95% of what I do on a daily basis is mostly spine. But I do take call and do cranial work too. So it's quite extensive, the amount of stuff that we have to learn and do.
Yeah, that's mind blowing. I have a family history of glioblastoma brain tumors in my
Bless.
family. So they saw a doctor like you when they were going through treatment.
Yes. Yeah. I take care of patients with that condition too, which is definitely challenging. So,
Yes, yeah. My dad had two siblings pass away from it, of four kids.
oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it can definitely be a life-changing diagnosis for sure. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so thankful for doctors like you that do their best to try and help folks through some very serious, like the conditions and things that you're working on are really life-threatening, right? And
Yeah.
very very serious. And if people are interested to know more about the type of work that Betsy does, one of the things that you do that I think is really neat on social media is that you do different cases
Yeah.
that you've been doing and it's really interesting, even if you're not a doctor, to just kind of see some of the x-rays and stuff, and you talk about what the problem is and then how you would treat it, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the kind of things I started with social media because I love to teach,
Mm.
and doing what I do, I don't really get the opportunity to, I mean, I teach my patients, but I don't have like students. And so I used TikTok and social media as kind of a teaching outlet, and that was kind of slow to grow, but it's really kind of transformed my whole platform, and that's what people know me for. And it's really fun because there's so many different things that I see, and I'm really trying to aim those studies not to doctors, because most doctors, I mean, a lot of people already know that stuff, but more to like students and people that are learning, and even, you know, my patients, or to people that are not even in medicine. So I really
Yeah.
try to tame it to that. So it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think you really are educating a broader group of people. And I've seen a few of your day in a life and like what it looks like to have a family and be a surgeon. And so it's really interesting to the rest of us to just learn about how other people live and work, and which is, part of the reason I do my podcast. What are some of the most asked questions that you've been getting about your work and life?
um So, I mean, I think I do those. I'm assuming you're asking more like what social media or
Yeah, like what are some of
yeah,
the things that people are most curious about?
yeah. I think people just really kind of don't understand the complexities. It's not necessarily being a surgeon or being a physician, but it's like integrating work-life balance. That's the thing I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about, and that's one reason why I really do a lot of those like day in the life, because it does require a lot of organization and communication with my spouse. And it can get very tricky because I don't have a shift. I don't work 8 to 5 and I get off at 5 and I clock out and I leave. It's I leave when I'm done. If I'm done at 3:30, that's awesome. If I'm done at 9 o'clock, that's awesome. If I get called in the middle of the night at 1 in the morning and I have to leave immediately because someone's dying, like I have to always have a plan B. So I have to have a
Mhm.
very organized everything in order to make sure that someone's home with my kids. You know, my husband just can't like leave if I'm on call. Someone has to be there in case I have to just leave in a heartbeat. So yeah, so it's a totally different way of living than what some people are used to seeing. So I think it's kind of fun to for people to really understand that side of what doctors do. So that's the
Mhm.
biggest questions I get.
Yes, I can see that. I also see that people, especially being on social media, this happens, right? But very pressed about certain things. Like you did
Oh
a day in
yeah.
your life one time and people were like, well, where is your husband? Like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
Maybe you can speak to that, like how your husband does do lots and he picks up all the other things. But that's people's first question is like, just because you showed yourself today with your kids, it must mean that you like that he doesn't help.
Yeah, it cracks me up because people assume that they know your entire life off like a 15-second video, and that I'm showing my perspective on things. And so that has absolutely nothing to do with anything else. So it kills me just because people, especially on TikTok, I think more so than other platforms, but they can hide behind a keyboard and they can say just the most bizarre things and they think it's okay. And you know, I think to be a creator on social media is so hard because you get so much criticism and it's harsh. Like people
Yeah.
have no filter, and i'm I'm used to that, I guess, being a physician and going through some of the training that we have to do to really have our guard up. But it's a whole nother level when people start attacking like your family or like your child or your ability to be a mom or like the way I look or my glasses or whatever. I mean, it's like every hour I'm getting some kind of harsh criticism on there with the amount of content that I put out. And I've learned just to deal with it. It really hurt my feelings initially. And now I just think it's hilarious. Now, some things still piss me off to no end, but it's whatever. It is what it is. And I think I really admire people that are big time creators on there, because it really does require a strong confidence level to be able to put yourself out there and to take the criticism that comes with it. So
yeah, absolutely. I hear from a lot of people, and even from my own experience, it can be really challenging when you're working with your spouse to figure out who is going to do what responsibilities. Do you have any tips for folks about how you work that out with your spouse?
I think I still struggle with it. And my husband, he is such a good man, but it's still like constant, even though we've been parents for like 7 years now. And even outside of that, being married for 11 years, it's just requires an extreme amount of trust and an extreme amount of communication. And it really depends on the personality types too. But like, you know, I just know what he needs to hear from me to know when I'm going to be home, or like who's going to pick up the kids from school or from karate or from whatever. And so, yeah, it just really requires, I think, a lot of trust, communication, and love for your relationship to really know, like, it's not always about me. And if I had the mindset of, well, I'm a neurosurgeon and who cares? You've got to do everything else. That's not like that. That's not going to work for a relationship, because you're both weighing into the relationship. And so you have to like kind of, you know, work together to do things together. And if not, it's not going to work. And I've seen in this profession, unfortunately, so many failed relationships. And it's all comes down to communication and your ability to really care about the other's feelings. And it requires a lot of effort and a lot of time to nurture into that relationship. And even now, if I'm going through the week and I realize, shit, I haven't even like talked to him about X, Y, and Z, I have to say, okay, I'm taking 1 hour and we're just going to sit down and discuss whatever needs to happen so we can all make sure we're on the same page. So yeah, it's just a lot of.
It sounds like as you were talking, before you said the word communication, I'm like, it sounds so much like it's also helpful to know, because sometimes, you know, it's easy to look at other people and be like, oh, they haven't figured out. But hearing that it's a constant work for you guys as well gives me hope.
Yeah, it does. And still, I do things. I'm like, why didn't I tell him that? Or why did I just assume that he would know that? And it's just, you know, it's a lot. And it's never, even though people put out there on social media, or they're putting out their best face, they don't ever, I mean, sometimes we like to show our failures, but we don't like to be vulnerable to everybody, because we're already vulnerable. So we're not show that side very much. And everybody has to realize that everybody's normal and everybody has those struggles. Everybody doesn't feel so confident about themselves. And that's life.
I feel like the more and more I talk to women, especially working moms, that a lot of people really, if everybody's really honest with each other, there's a lot of survival going on instead of thriving, right? Like I think that's I often try and like share what I'm going through with listeners or things like that, because I don't want them to think like, oh, Stephanie has kids and she works full time and she does a podcast on the side and she owns her own business. And I want them to know that those things are hard and they don't work perfectly, and that it's challenging.
Yeah, it is. I mean, just look at, we had this plan for tomorrow and I even have it on my calendar and I'm like, oh shit. So I like, you know, things happen and just kind of have to roll with the punches and roll with the flow. And you're right. Like, even though we seem like we have it all put together, inside we really don't. We're just all on the same page, just trying to live the next 5 minutes of our life so we can keep going.
Yes, it's so true. You were giving me some motivation today, because tonight I was like, man, I'm so tired from my day. And then I was thinking about you and doing surgery, and I was like, okay, I can pick it up. Like I gotta keep going and get some stuff done here. Jeepers. I know that one of the things that you're really interested also is about women in medicine. And I saw the statistic posted about 2% of neurosurgeons are female. So have you found challenges in your career because you're a woman?
Yes. So I think the statistic you were quoting of was like 2% of spine surgeons
Okay.
are women. So like in medicine period, like if you look at I think in this day and age of women versus men that are accepted in a medical school, it's actually probably, I think it's like 55. It's more women than men. I mean, the
Okay.
percentages show more women are entering medical school than men in this day and age, but there are still certain specialties that are so not diverse. And neurosurgery and spine surgery, orthopedic surgery, vascular surgery, those very endurance based surgical subspecialties are still so male dominated because of a multitude of reasons. And a lot of it's what I mentioned, like the dedication it takes of your entire, like really reproductive years to be able to train to become something like that. And not a lot of women are really into that or think that they can do that or think that they can have a family and still do that. And I think that I think that it's has challenges because of that. And because I didn't have a lot of female colleagues, I didn't have anybody to commiserate with or talk about girl things with, or, if I wanted to have a child, that would be at least, when I was in residency, which was 15 years ago. I mean, that wasn't really a thing. I mean, it's probably more so now. There are protocols about maternity leave now, but that wasn't anything that you talked about or even I had one female resident that had a baby, and I think she was out for 4 weeks, and that's it. And then came back working 80 hours a week with a newborn, and that's just insanity.
It's so insane, especially Betsy. Like we have amazing maternity leaves in Canada, so I just can't even. And I had C-sections. Like when you say 4 weeks, I'm like, that is crazy, crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's crazy. And she did it in residency where it was expected. She comes back and work 80 hours. I had my kids older, and I definitely took the risk of infertility issues and stuff like that because I waited so long. But I mean, I was an attending and chose my maternity leave. And when I came back, and I still came back at 4 weeks and 6 weeks with my two kids because I was afraid of losing my practice.
Yeah.
And I didn't work that much coming back. I mean, I did work, but I didn't work 80 hours a week. I worked like 40, 50, 60 hours a week. But it's just the stresses that come into the profession, and that's all professional women, it's so challenging to try to do that and have kids and raise a family and try to do it right and be present, but also be present at work. And and then be present in your relationship. It's just like, we can't do it all.
Yeah.
and then have time for ourselves and skincare and all this shit.
Oh, I know. I find like it's like, to be a good friend, do this, be a good mom, do this, to be a good partner, do this, but don't forget to be good at work. And like, yeah, it's a lot.
Right. It's too much. It's a lot.
Yeah. And they're obviously given, like you said, like given some of the hours, the years of training, it is, I mean, maybe it's comparable to some jobs, but it is somewhat unique. So have some changes happen, or do you think there are some particular changes that would really help? Like, what are some of the things to make it better?
I mean, I don't know exactly how to make it better. I mean, I do know that having more women around and developing policies on maternity leave and things like that will definitely increase the amount of women in the profession and normalizing that, because that's really the only way for change. And medical culture, healthcare culture is so different. Like, it is just, I wouldn't say it is negative, but like, we learn on being told what we're doing wrong instead of like being applauded for doing something right. And that's just the way healthcare training is or has been. And the only way we can change that is by people like in my generation changing how, but it's this perception of, well, that's the way I had it, so I've got to relay that to the next generation
Right.
of healthcare professionals. And it just perpetuates this toxicity culture. And it's not helpful for culturing, developing people that are already kind of predisposed to, insecurities, or not sure that's what they want to do because of being able to have a family or whatever. So I think, having more women in the profession, more positivity around training, being more accepting and accommodating. I mean, even if it does extend the training a little bit, you're gonna make the people within the profession more nurturing. I think better doctors. I mean,
Mhm. Yeah, there's just so much benefit. You're making me think about today. I had to take my daughter to the pediatrician, and before we met the pediatrician, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I wonder if it's a man or a woman, because if it's a man, she's not going to be honest or and like say, right? Like just, and that's only like a small smidgen of why it's important to have women in the field. And luckily it was a woman, and it did go very well. But yeah, it's so important in so many different ways. What is something you love about your job?
I mean, I just really love to be able to feel like I can relate to people. I love it when people tell me that they feel like they can communicate with me better, that I listen better than maybe another physician they went to, or they understand something better than they did if they saw somebody else, because it makes me feel like I'm doing a good job. And I mean, sometimes yeah, you want to be a good surgeon and you want to have good outcomes. But a lot of times it's just about patients understanding their problems and being felt like they're being listened to. And it's the relaying of being compassionate and being understanding that's so helpful. Then you can have the best surgeon in the world, but they're a complete dick. Then you don't have the trust in them to be able to trust your body with them. And a lot of people choose somebody else. So that's to me the most rewarding part is that part of my job. So
Oh, that's amazing. In Canada, there isn't a choice, right? Like if they're a tick, you're still stuck with them. Oh, yeah. The difference in medical care. But our system is having some major challenges right now, for sure, up here. All right.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting in the dynamic of healthcare, because there are limitations in the US. We still have the freedom of choice, and there's not a long wait, but it's so expensive, and there's arguments for both sides. But
I have to tell you, Betsy, when we went to see the pediatrician today, my daughter was like, we have to pay for parking at the hospital. And I was like, and then I explained to her about how like the hospitals and the doctors are like all paid for through taxes. So that's how you pay for it. But we don't pay as much as, let's say, and I explained how when you go to the States and you have a baby, how you have to pay, and how in Canada you just pay for parking. Like right? Like otherwise you pay taxes, but you literally just pay for parking. And so it was so funny, right? Like so Canadian for her to be like, we have to pay for parking. And I was like, oh my gosh, kid. Like
yeah,
that's the worst of your problems today.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, let's jump in on some of the closing questions. What is one piece of advice you want to leave listeners with?
I mean, I think we touched on some of it, but it's just being honest with yourself. And I think we, as women, like you said, we put so much stress on ourselves to like be a good partner, to be a good mom, to be a good in our job, and pushing and pulling, and we take so much out of ourselves that we forget to internally reflect on what helps us be a good person. And that's what I've really tried to grow over the past few years, is I can only give if I'm honest with myself. And so if I'm not happy and energetic and pleased with my life, I'm not going to project that onto all aspects of my life. So self reflection, self-healing, self-care, all those things yourself should be number one, above your kids, above your spouse, above your job. You always have to come number one. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Oh, I want to ask you a follow-up question on that. I know that you also exercise. How do you prioritize that? Like, what's a tip you would give people who are struggling with something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I also have gone through tremendous physical challenges in my life, and I was extremely overweight when I first started, actually my pretty much my whole adult life. And then when I started having kids, it got even worse because I gained a ton more weight. And I think a lot of women struggle with that. And then I would like, oh, I'm so fat, I'm so ugly. Like, how can anybody love me? How would anybody trust me with their back if I'm fat myself? And, so anyway, it's just a lot of, like you said. So I made a promise to myself after I had my son, but then certainly after I had my daughter, my second child, and I decided I was not like, okay, I'm making a commitment to myself that I'm going to eat better, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to prioritize my health, because I see, from my job, like what can happen if you don't do that. And so I really just made day one after I had my daughter, I knew I was not having any more kids, that I am putting myself number one, and I am going to make a complete lifestyle overhaul.
Yeah.
And that's the only way of success. Like these fad diets, and I'm going to no, I'm going to starve myself. That's not sustainable. I'm going to exercise every single day for an hour a day. That's just, you have to do something that works in your lifestyle. And for me was diet modification, and realizing that I was eating my stress, and I really wasn't eating for nutrition. I was eating for how I made myself feel better when I was sad. And so once I really understood, like tried to understand those behavior patterns and how I could change it, it really made me think about how I utilize food. And also the same thing with exercise. Like that's my time every day alone. Otherwise I wouldn't have time. So if I slept and didn't work out, I literally would have 0 hours the day for me. So I use that time for exercise as not like, oh God, I got to get up and work out. It's like, oh God, I get to spend like 30 minutes with myself, and I'm going to like listen to music I love, and I'm going to like, ride on the bike or whatever I enjoy doing that. So I made changes in my life that I knew I could say that kept me happy, but also that I could do long term. So
Betsy, I love that so much. While you were talking, I was trying not to cry because I have so much of a similar story, and I'm on week 2 of my gym membership. So it's really, really new to me. And I have chronic migraines, I have high blood pressure. I was pretty sick a few years ago. And I really have just gotten to the point, kind of like where you did, where I've needed to prioritize my health. And
yeah,
I've done some episodes recently on self-care. So honestly, everything you just said, just put it all into practice. Everything that we've been chatting about recently on the podcast. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
All right, let's keep going here. What is the best rule you ever broke?
Oh God. I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think. I'm a rule follower, so I don't know if I break rules.
Being a woman who's a neurosurgeon, that sounds like a pretty good one.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Societal
breaking,
norms or whatever.
yeah. I guess you could say that. I mean, my husband is a stay-at-home dad, and I'm a working mom, and that is like kind of probably the biggest rule I would say that most people have in gender identification roles. So, yeah,
Right.
I would say most proud of that. And making it, normalizing it, right? It's normal.
Yeah.
We can do that. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Can you name another woman that inspires you?
Ooh, my mom. I mean,
Yeah.
seeing her live with her injury for 30 years now, it's truly inspiring. Not only what she did before she got injured, but just the ability for her to still persevere and do what she does every day as a quadriplegic is truly inspiring to me. She's my hero. So
Oh, I love that so much. Is there a podcast you're loving right now?
I don't
Like, she probably doesn't have time.
I don't ever listen to podcasts. I used to. So, okay. So the podcast that I have listened to is Dr. Death, because I mean, everybody talks about Dr. Death being a neurosurgeon, but I also listened to a lot of like podcasts on diet and nutrition. And there is a podcast. Oh, trying to think of the physician's name, but it's a podcast on like healthy lifestyle as a physician and as a woman. And gosh, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's
send
excellent.
It to me after, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, perfect. Yes. And anyway, I just find that to be very, I live that every day. So it's a good podcast that I listen to. So.
Oh, amazing. I'm glad that exists. Tell us about a book that made you wiser.
I would say The Obesity Code. I think that as a physician, we learn about a lot of different things within our body. But one thing I really wish there was more in medical education is about nutrition and how it affects our body. And you think that doctors know how to eat there? We do not.
I think we all need that training.
Yeah. And it's just, it taught me a lot about the science of food and like the things I told you about, and understanding like about how different types of food really can affect your health and your thinking and your sickness and inflammation and all kinds of things. So it was helpful for me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I've learned so much about medicine and women in medicine and all kinds of value that will definitely be important for the listeners. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Thank you for listening to Women Don't Do That. I hope you feel inspired to do whatever it is you think you can't do. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Stay connected on Twitter and Instagram at WOMENDontDOThat. I would love to have you join the conversation, so make sure you join our next Instagram Live. Find all our podcast and blog content at WOMENDontDOThat.com. Join me next time.